Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing Cadence of Hyrule for the Nintendo Switch. Well, technically, its full title is Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the Necrodancer featuring The Legend of Zelda, but that's not a very marketable title, is it? It sounds more like something that you would put in a YouTube video when you're having a collab than an actual title for a game. So we're just going to stick with Cadence of Hyrule for now. So for those of you that don't know, this is not a traditional Zelda game. This is actually a sequel of sorts to Crypt of the Necrodancer, which was a Nintendo Switch eShop game that featured a girl named Cadence who was a gravedigger, but she did it to the music. This game just takes that basic element in gameplay but puts Zelda characters in it. I described it to my best friend as kind of like what Hyrule Warriors did, where it took the Dynasty Warriors gameplay and put Zelda elements into it. And he seemed to grasp the concept and was way more open to this game than he was to Hyrule Warriors. So this is the kind of game where it may take some getting used to at first, but I promise that you will be in for an amazing time if you persevere. At first, I was determined to hate this game. Granted, I picked it up day one, but still, in the beginning stages, I was like, ugh, this is so frustrating. Especially when I found out the hard way that your sword isn't actually assigned to a button. So my Zelda brain had to adjust to an auto-slash mechanic, which initially messed up my timing on some of the rhythm. But once I got used to that, and also once I got the broadsword, because I can't imagine using many other weapons except maybe the spear, it really helped to get me into the flow of things. And before long, I was beating along to the music and beating the enemies senseless and just feeling like I was becoming a god, or I guess goddess, because I chose to play as Zelda for like 90% of the game. While it's possible to switch between Cadence, Link, and Zelda, you only start out with one protagonist at the start and unlock the others as you go along. While this may be good for some players because each character has certain distinct abilities, I feel like they're not distinct enough to affect a playthrough. I only had to switch to Link a grand total of maybe once or twice, and it wasn't actually until the final dungeon that I even needed him. So I would say that this is the kind of game where if you're a girl that's been like, oh, I'm tired of playing as a male the whole time in Zelda, well, guess what? You could choose to play as Zelda for like 90% of this game, except for the final dungeon. And even then, you could still get through most of it with Zelda if you know what you're doing. Cadence, well, she's Cadence. I've never actually played Crypt of the Necrodancer, but just saying, if you're not a Zelda fan, you want to play as her instead, there's an option for it. Even though she has like no character development or personality whatsoever. I think they're expecting you to play Crypt of the Necrodancer if you want that, but considering how low this game is on plot, I mean, honestly, it's about as simple as if a first grader tried to make a story for a class project. But it sacrifices plot for the sake of insane action and incredible music. Defeating enemies to the beat is so much fun that it has an almost choreographed feel to it that is honestly unmatched in the entire Zelda series. Well, you could argue that Skyward Sword is kind of like that with the Wii Motion Plus. When the Wii Motion Plus doesn't work reliably, that's when things get a little bit weird. But with this game, you don't have to worry about fancy gimmicks. The only thing that's going to be stopping you from progressing is your own lack of rhythm. Thankfully, this game has a lot of options, one of which being the ability to customize how you want the game's presentation to be, if you want the beat to be even faster than normal, and even if you just want to ignore the beat altogether and just play it like A Link to the Past. However, I would strongly encourage you not to do that, because playing along to the rhythm offers a very different yet satisfying feel, and I really hope that Nintendo experiments with this in the future. So I want to make this clear if this wasn't already abundant by the graphic style and the overall presentation, that this is not a full-on Zelda game. It's a Crypt of the Necrodancer game with Zelda characters in it. However, the developers obviously had incredible respect for the Zelda franchise because in many ways this still feels like a traditional Zelda game in its own way. There are still dungeons to explore, albeit not very many. There are heart pieces to collect in the overworld. There are some side quests, although they're not nearly as involved as most other Zelda games. A couple of block pushing puzzles and hitting the right notes at the right time to play a familiar Zelda tune are about as involved as you're going to get as far as a side quest. You do, however, get major items, although you won't find them in the dungeons this time. You actually find them more in the overworld. So when Skyward Sword announced that they wanted to blur the line between dungeon and overworld, I would say that this game strikes that balance way better than Skyward Sword ever did. So yes, you do get major items, but the odd thing is, they don't seem like they put a lot of emphasis on them as far as the combat. In fact, most of the game I didn't even know what items in my inventory did. There were a couple of items that I didn't end up using at all until I got to the final dungeon, and even then it was sort of a done and over with moment. So I guess if you really need help and you're not good at using a sword, there's options. It just feels too cumbersome, especially when you're trying to keep the beat. You know, in a regular Zelda game, if you wanted to reflect a projectile, you'd use your shield. Easy and done. But now you have to use your shield in tandem to the music, and that just was too counterintuitive to me. So most of the time I just stuck with my sword, and very rarely did I ever use any of my other items unless it was a context-sensitive situation, like say using my hookshot to vault across a gap. Now this game's dungeons are randomly generated, so if you're looking for the tight level design that Nintendo is known for, this is not the game for you. The game obviously prioritizes fun over strategy, and while there are definitely elements of strategy, the dungeons are more so about just beating through waves and waves of enemies than trying to find enough keys to proceed and then beating the bosses. The bosses are really cleverly named, often taking a familiar Zelda enemy and changing its name so that it fits a musical instrument. However, the bosses are insanely easy. If you're overpowered enough, you can beat most of them on the first or second try if you know their patterns, which isn't always a bad thing. I think the easier the game gets, the more fun it becomes, because at first you're just like, oh my gosh, why do I have to keep starting over? Yes, you get Sheikah stones that can save your progress, but if you've done anything after that, then you'll have to do certain segments of the game all over again, and that gets very tedious. However, eventually you learn stuff like fast travel and more powerful abilities, and so the complaints become more and more non-existent the more you play. So this is definitely a game where if you're the type of person that makes your judgments upon just a few seconds or hours of gameplay, you're probably going to think Cadence of Hyrule isn't worth it. But I assure you, it is. Well, it's probably not going to beat most Zelda games if you don't look at it as a Zelda game. You'll find an immensely rewarding rhythm-based experience that also provides a glimpse into the future of what Zelda games could be like if Nintendo allows Westerners to take the reins more often. And who knows, maybe this is also a plug for Crypt of the Necrodancer. Maybe you're like me and you're very hesitant to try out new games, especially because the Switch eShop has just way too many games to choose from. But hey, who knows? Maybe that'll end up being a cult classic. Also, this game is very reasonably priced at only $25. And you might be thinking, $25 for an eShop game? But this game has a lot of content to justify it. For one, the music is incredible. Sometimes I actually prolonged some of this footage just so that I could show off the music. In addition to that, some of the songs are actually live performed. It's hard to tell which ones they are because most of it's very techno, but the fact that they even included one piece that was live recorded is just incredible. In addition to that, there's a lot of optional content to search for. There's heart pieces throughout the overworld, there's hidden treasure chests, and so completionists will definitely have their work cut out for them. The overworld feels rather small by Zelda standards, but again, fun is the main priority here over grandness. So if you're expecting this to be the next Breath of the Wild or the next 2D Zelda revival, well, you're going to have to wait for Link's Awakening for the Switch or whatever games Nintendo comes up with next. Overall, I think $25 is a very reasonable price, especially considering how much content there is and the amazing music, and just how well flowing the game is, especially with all the options in case somehow the main game just isn't good enough and you want to customize the game experience to how you want it. If you choose to play without using most of the major items, you can do that. If you want to play the whole game as Zelda with only using Link for like 1% of the gameplay, you can do that. So then the females will be happy. The only thing that I would say is an absolute, like, yeah, you should probably skip this, is if you don't like playing games digital only. Because this is an indie game, of course, there is not a physical release as of yet. So you better have enough space on your Switch. On the other hand, it means that it's really easy to play this game whenever you want, and the game has a nice way of feeling like it's in short bursts, as you can save anytime you want, and the Sheikah stones are fairly abundant if you know where to look. It may not feel like it at first, but this game feels very much suited to both a handheld and a console experience. So I highly suggest that you download it now. Even if you're not a fan of Zelda games, if you liked Crypt of the Necrodancer, or if you like rhythm games in general, you're going to find a great time here. With that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions for future videos. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and keep to the rhythm of love! Because my first mission trip was called Cadence, Life with a New Rhythm, so maybe that's why I like this game so much. Bye!